Hey everybody, just a quick intro video now, just to get you off and running on the lab and quiz this week, and related to using the Google Earth file, particularly that's related to a lot of that, and generating climagraphs and water balance diagrams. So here I have opened up in our module this week, so we see here week 6, looking at our global climates. I have everything here that you're going to generally be working on this week, except for, of course, I'll also post this lecture as a link once it's done. But otherwise, generally a lot of things for this video that we're going to be interested in are kind of starting here for this description for Lab 5, the Google Earth file that you're going to download and be working with, as well as some other instructions, working on the actual lab itself here and the quiz. And so you can use those and open those up as needed. So just here also I'll run and have Lab 5 open kind of on the side. And so as we just were looking at here, you'll have this Google Earth file called climatestations.kmz that you'll want to download. And of course, once you have Google Earth open, or you can open it separately, you can open up that climate stations file. And when you do so, as per typical of some of the other Google Earth files we've been working with in the past, it'll zoom you into wherever it feels necessary. But really, you want to scroll around and notice when you start zooming into places, you're going to start seeing all of these white dots everywhere, which are all individual stations where climate has been recorded for at least the past 30 years. And so we have climate normals for all of these given locations. And how you're going to use that in conjunction with the lab, if we actually go into the lab, and there's quite a lengthy description of really all of the same material that you'll need here and the questions you'll be answering within the lab. If we go to the lab here and open it up, really you have just 2 questions that are worth 10 points each for your lab this week. And in both questions, we'll be answering the same 5 set of questions within that question 1 and question 2. And so noting when you open up your question 1 and question 2, all it will ask you is for the climate of a location given between, and then it'll give you a pair of latitude values. So in this case, we see when I opened mine up, it gave me equator to 10 degrees south for question 1, and then in question 2 from 40 to 45 degrees south. So you want to find a location off of that, one of those white dots, as we just saw here, that fits within that range described here. And so note that for all of you, it will slightly come up differently. So it's going to essentially randomly generate a value for question, or a range of 2 values for your to find a location within for all of you. So yours may show up and it may say for question 1 somewhere between 10 and 20 degrees north instead of the equator and 10 degrees south. Or generally the question 1 should be more an tropical or subtropical type of latitude range, and question 2 should be a more mid, possibly higher latitude range. But generally, again, you're all going to have slightly different values just that are randomly generated. And then you'll just use, again, going back to Google Earth here, you'll find a station that fits within that area. So as we just saw, and you can track down here in the bottom right where your latitude and longitude are. So with my case, we had between the equator and 10 degrees south. So I can find an example, and you can again keep zooming in. So if you either double click, as I just did there, or again using the tool over here on the right, either way, you can click on any location. And note when you click on those white dots, it'll pop up with this listing here that gives you its latitude, its longitude, its elevation at that location, as well as this Jan T all the way through December T. So that's saying January, and we see every month here through December, and the T denoting temperature, or that average temperature for your climograph, and then as well Jan P through December P. So again, so similarly your precipitation in the number of millimeters for every month of the year. And so with those values, what you're going to do, and again, this is all described throughout the lab, but if we jump back here to Journal Modules page, in this intro kind of description of everything, you can open up this page and it'll describe through all of these components you need to be working on. But what you want to open up, again, really what you'll be creating here with that information is first a climograph and then a water balance diagram, and you'll be using those to answer the set of 5 questions within each of those 2 more broader questions that are simply giving you the latitudinal range to find a location in. So to create first your climograph, you can come, and actually both the climograph and the water balance diagram, you'll come to this link here again on this description page. So when you click on this, and note briefly that if you go to click on this and it describes this here right for you in this paragraph, this link will only work for you if you are either on campus on a campus computer or you're on your own laptop that is linked into wirelessly the internet on campus. Either you have to be in that condition, or if you're off campus, you have to use, as noted here, a VPN network. You can either set one up on your own by going to this link here, and that's pretty quick and simple, and that will allow you to log in and essentially act as though you are on campus with your internet connection, and acting essentially as you would if you were on campus with a campus computer or on the campus network. But this link will only work if you are in one of those conditions. If you're off campus and you're not on a VPN network, the link won't work, so just make sure that you're hooked in that way somehow. But it'll bring you to this page again where you can essentially set up everything that you need based off of that Google Earth information that you're getting here. So what you'll do is simply take all the information here and start plugging it in to this page. So you can give the name here. I just did a copy and paste there, but essentially just changing all this information so that it matches up with everything that you just are finding off of this information. And so noting here all of the everything will change except for this plant available water. That can stay at 150 millimeters. Essentially that's just related to, in that analogy of a glass of water that I had for the first of the 2 main lectures for this week. Essentially just telling you how much water the soil can hold. So if you change this, that would either a higher value would be more water, a lower value would be less, but we're just going to keep that constant at 150. Everything else though should change with those inputs. Here's that site name, the altitude, latitude and longitude, and of course for every month you can switch around the values. You can start playing around with these and enter them as needed. So for example, I go to that January temperature here, find it's 26.3, and simply just type that in with my information, and then move along, of course, with all of these. And then when you're finally done and you're ready to make those changes, of course I haven't done all of the changes here, but just you get the idea. You then hit update graphics, and below it will then start to update everything for you and spit out that water balance, or excuse me, that climograph and water balance diagrams. Of course I only changed a couple things here. In this one I just changed the name, a little bit of this. I changed the one value for temperature here, so we see this kind of spike upwards. But otherwise, everything else was still following along that Eugene example that was here prior. But as you saw, it'll update automatically all of this climograph for you, or excuse me, both the climograph and the water balance diagram that you created. So then you will use those, and actually this rest of this page goes through how to upload that climograph to your answers in Canvas. So you want to follow along these directions that are provided for you here. I'm just making sure you do so. If you have any problems with that, of course, make sure to post them within our discussion area, our discussion post for the week, this week on Canvas. But then finally, as noted, you'll be answering these 5 questions related to those climographs and water balance diagrams. So when you go back to the quiz, or excuse me, the lab here, you'll be answering these 5 questions. So first, you'll generally just be describing what you're seeing there in terms of the climate of that location that you selected. Of course, you're using terms in the sense of if you were describing this to a friend, or you're a family member to someone else, or just an average person on the street in Eugene, you're trying to use these words that compare this climate that in this location that you're describing to a traditional kind of Eugene sense climate, whether that's warm, cold, hot, dry, whatever it may be. Or excuse me, warm, cold, dry, wet, I should say, excuse me. And so just stating along those lines, whether it seems more maritime, more continental, and generally finding out those patterns and taking along with that the Köppen climate classification that occurs within. So using the map that's out of your book that we looked at through the lectures this week. Also noting just the general climatic processes you think that are going on there, so what air masses dominate. We didn't really focus too much on that this week, but you can go back and review those different air masses and air mass types from before exam 1. As well, just thinking more there, what are the main processes you think that are dictating or driving really the weather, both the temperature and precipitation that are being seen in this location. Also then noting the general surface water patterns. We spent quite a bit of time on that in the second of the 2 lectures. And I tried to give you some examples, kind of running through, setting up what's going on within those locations throughout the year. So using kind of those as examples. And then finally, also noting the cover vegetation in those locations. And so also to give you an example of what's going on there, you should be able to get some sort of sense based on the water balance diagrams. But another way you can do this is when you're in Google Earth, you can turn on the photos here and look for photos that are close by to your location and try and find something that gives you a good sense of what the vegetation is. So here, for example, we can see generally looks pretty tropical, like a tropical rainforest type of area. And so you can start to describe that vegetation a little bit, trying to use some of these pictures that you find near your climate station as examples. So you can use those. Again, all 5 of those together, you'll answer for then the question 1, as we see the climate station that I, of course, pulled out there. And then similarly, the same type of, a whole same set of steps for question 2. We answer those same 5 set of sub-questions as part of that for the second set of climagraphs and water balance diagrams that you create. So using those, you'll also, just very briefly, you'll be using this same Google Earth file for your quiz this week. It'll essentially ask you to find different locations. They should all generally be searchable up here in the search bar. So whatever name it gives you the station, you should be able to start typing that in and locate the place. And look at the location, and it'll ask you different questions related to those sites. So you'll just be using both this Google Earth file for both the lab and quiz this week. So again, that's just a quick rundown on how to set everything up. That's the very framework here. You can go back through, make sure you're reading through this whole section here related to the lab and its descriptions, just to make sure that you have all of this, and especially uploading. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to post those related towards this. All right.